welcome back to the Franchise Growth Show, where we talk with founders who are not only chasing value, but increasing scale. Because in reality, most chase scale without knowing what they are actually scaling. The goal is not necessarily more revenue, it's to drive more value. And today I am joined by David Straub, the co-founder of Cork Candles, a luxury scent bar where guests craft candles, connect with friends, and create something personal. It is an experience-driven retail with margins up to 45%. And now they're franchising. And the model, it's already producing strong early returns. So let's dig into how Dave and his team is making this happen. First and foremost, Dave, thank you for being on. We appreciate you being here, sir.
Yeah, I feel like, Joe, you and I are a team in helping others reach their goals.
100%. So I'd love to hear kind of like the origin stories, because my understanding, at least, is the brand started really with a story and a legacy of making. But could you share with the listeners how Cork Candles began?
Yeah, so it's a family story. So when I was 12, I made candles in my basement with my dad. It was really probably one of my first jumps into entrepreneurship, where I made 3 different candles. I made a Christmas tree candle, I made an icebox candle, and tapered candles. Put them in a wagon, went around my neighborhood, pulling the wagon in my neighborhood, knocking on doors and taking orders. And then I'd come back to my basement and make candles. So my dad was an artist. He did a lot of painting. He did woodwork. He worked in different mediums. And when I reached that age, he got into candle making. Probably got me into candle making. And so he bought books, and we read books together, and we experimented, set up kind of a candle lab in the basement. And most of the candles that we made were made with molds. Today, most candles that you see purchased are purchased in vessels. And so the industry has really moved away from molded candles to vessel candles. And that's primarily because you can mass produce vessel candles versus molded candles. They have to set up overnight. You have to take them out of the mold. And then sometimes you have to polish them, or if the wax tunnels, then you have to fill the tunnel. It's a lot more work, a lot more labor intensive to make a molded candle versus a vessel candle. Fast forward 50 some years, and between the time I made candles and the time that Cork Candles opened, started, ran, sold many different businesses. Some of them I started on my own. So I was responsible for creating the playbook and growing that business. And then my wife and I, in the early 2000s, we bought 2 Brewster's Real Ice Cream franchises. And then we added a Nathan's Hot Dog franchise to one of those locations. So it became a dual concept. We ran those for 20 years before we sold our last Brewster's January 1 of 2024. And so I feel, as a franchisor, what I am able to bring to the table is a real empathy for franchisees that sign on with Cork Candles, because I was a franchisee for 20 years in a dual concept, as well as multiple locations within the Brewster's concept. And then I've also started businesses on my own where I was responsible for creating the playbook. So I know the difference of what energy it takes to create the playbook versus being given a playbook. And so to finish the story, so I have 2 children. They worked in the businesses at Brewster's with us. My oldest son, Kenny, came to me while he was working at a private equity firm and said, "Dad, I saw this concept, this Cork candle concept, and it looks really interesting. I think I might want to do it." And so he and I chatted about my history with candle making, my history with starting businesses, growing businesses, and the thought of the initial thought was we were going to franchise this. So first we had to develop the concept, proof of concept. So we opened our first store in 2021, but it was really my son that is the driving force behind Cork and Candles. As a father, I just thought it would be really good for him to bolster his resume. We're at a private equity firm. You look at an Excel spreadsheet and you look at the ratios and the numbers and you go, they look good or they don't. But then you pick up the phone and you call the CFO or the COO, CEO of the firm and you say, you have to fix it. There's a number that's out of whack. But as a business owner, the burden's on you to fix the problem. And so I just thought it would be really good for my son to expand his resume from not only being able to look at the numbers and say something's out of whack, but being an operator to fixing it. And it's just been an absolute blast to do this with my son, Kenny.
That's an amazing origin story. We're on our third generation, right? That's amazing. There's a lot of correlations and crossovers really from y'all's experience and my own. We've both built and started, scaled and sold multiple businesses, several of them being franchises. I personally worked inside private equity on due diligence. So there's an awful lot of overlapping layers that I think we can really dive into. And that's amazing because that's a lot of where the audience is listening to as well. As they're a small business operator and they're maybe thinking about exiting or selling, or there's somebody who wants to become an entrepreneur and looking at what is the best option for them to be able to navigate forward. So having someone such as yourself and Kenny, who's got that background and experience, is invaluable. As we jump into you officially launching this franchise, were there any pain points maybe that you remember vividly from being on the other side of before you created and those playbooks and everything else that made you or had you do things slightly differently this go around?
Yeah, so there's lots of pain points. So I call it scar tissue. So Joe, you growing and selling many businesses, I know that you know what scar tissue is. Scar tissue is you head down a road and it's a dead end, or you should have made a left-hand turn, but you made the right-hand turn. And so we want to find candidates that have grit, someone that when something goes wrong, because there's something's going to go wrong. The plumbing's going to break tomorrow. There's going to be a slip and fall on your property. Your insurance isn't going to get renewed. The advertising didn't land well, and you're constantly developing scar tissue. And so instead of calling things failures, we call them learning experiences. So there's been a bunch of learning experiences. And so what we felt at the start of this is the most important thing to a new franchisee is that there's a proven concept, that all the kinks have been worked out. And when the playbook is handed over, they don't have to worry about, well, where do I buy my wax? What kind of wax do I buy? What size wick goes in this particular vessel? What size vessel? Where do I buy my vessels? And so a candidate or a franchisee's focus can be on servicing the customer rather than building a playbook. So I do remember early on, before we even moved into our first location, we bought a 100-pound wax melter and we put it in my basement. And my son decided that he was going to he made 84 candles as a test. And the next day he lit one of those candles and it had no scent. It had 0 scent. And so I went to my son and I said, Kenny, next time you do a test, could you just test one candle? Don't make 84. So we have 84 candles that aren't going to smell. But there's a silver lining in this story. We learned early on that very much like barbecuing chicken, and when you put the seasoning in it, you have to let it marinate for the seasoning to get in there. And that's the same thing with fragrance oil. And so if you come into our store, at the very end, we'll give you some candle care instructions and we'll tell you wait 7 days before you burn these. So 2 weeks later, my son lit another one of those 84 candles and it smelled beautifully. So we didn't waste those 84 candles. But the lesson still holds. If you're going to test things, just test with one. You don't have to make a full batch of things, because if it goes bad, then you've just wasted 84 candles, right? So that's one of our early learning experiences.
I love that. And to your point, it's a learning experience that you can apply to the next test, right? So that there's only one instead of 84. In reference to the model, let's kind of pivot to maybe a customer facing viewpoint for a moment, if that's okay. Walk us through what like that signature experience looks like when a guest walks into one of your stores.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, or perhaps the answer that I like to give is as interesting. So I really feel that candle making in our store is a metaphor for people coming together. So we paid for and trademarked the phrase "where friends gather," and we opened our first store at the end of COVID. In fact, the reason we got the space is the company failed that was there before because of COVID. It was a customer-facing business. So the government in Pennsylvania said that you couldn't have anybody in your store, and then the government said you could have 50% occupancy. Well, that store didn't survive, and so we were able to get the space. And interesting, it was painting. It was one of the painting concepts that was in there. So very similar to our concept, where people are coming in for an experience. And so, what we learned. One of the things we learned during COVID, or we were reminded, is we're social creatures. During COVID, you couldn't go to a funeral, you couldn't go to a wedding, you couldn't come into the office, and we missed that interaction and that connection. So we built the space and we built the experience so people would want to come in. They would feel wonderful just being in the space. And a byproduct is they go home with 2 perfectly made candles. They're going to burn right, and they're going to smell great. But they've created a memory. We believe our business is all about creating memories together. Scent is one of the strongest things that pulls us to a memory. I know, Joe, that you probably have memories, and the listeners probably have memories of a pie in the kitchen, or going to grandmom's house, or the smell of an apron. Smell is a very strong connector to memories. And so in our scent library, we have over 45 different scents. So guests come in, they're seated, they're greeted at a table, they're explained what the experience is going to be like, and then they're invited to go into the scent library where they can smell a bunch of different scents, and they're also able to combine 2 scents. And so if they decide to combine scents, they're going to make a candle that they will never find any other place. You won't find it at CVS or Target or Walmart or any mall store, because if you mix vanilla with sugar cookie, you're gonna get a scent that you're just not gonna find any other place. But it's gonna be unique to that guest's experience. Now, every guest makes 2 candles, and that what I just described is our signature experience, where they go into the scent library, they choose their scent, they choose their vessels. Then they come back to the table with their vessels and their choice of scents. We bring the fragrance oil to their table, where they're kind of a mixologist, where they're deciding, do they want a 60-40 ratio, a 90-10, a 80-20 of the 2 scents that they selected. Once they finish being a mixologist, then we bring hot wax to their table. They mix the 2 together. Then we take the candles away to a cooling rack. You can cool wax faster by lowering the temperature, so you could put it in a refrigerator, or you could blow air across the top. We've chosen to blow air across the top because we found that the finished product is a better product than lowering the temperature. And the reason we do that, and the reason we chose the wax that we chose, is we want our guests to go home with the candles that they made that night. So about 18 minutes later, the candle's actually hard enough for us to box and bag to go home with our guests. Now, that's one experience. The other experience, I would invite your listeners to go out to Instagram and just type in Cork and Candles. They'll see a bunch of videos there, but every month we have a different Candle of the Month class. In the class, our server, which we call a chandler. A chandler is a professional candle maker. So you go to Starbucks, you're served by a barista. You come to Cork and Candles, you're served by a chandler. And we teach them how to make something that looks more like a piece of art. Most of our guests probably don't burn them. They sit out on display. So now's December. So if guests were to come in this month, they would make a Christmas tree. If they came in last month, they would make something that looks just like a pie. If they came in October, they would make a cauldron. So it's our Halloween theme. So every month we have a different really art project where a group of people can come in and make something that's really, really unique and fun to do.
That's amazing. Multiple different types of experiences, then all driven around one of the strongest senses of smell. So that's fantastic, creating that lever that you referenced to remember the memory and create the memory, and one that's going to last. That's simply phenomenal. From an operations standpoint, I know your locations are doing up to 45% net margins. What are the levers that are driving that level of profitability?
There's two things that we watch pretty closely. One is cost of goods sold. In our industry, unlike the food industry, there's no waste. So in the food industry, and so I know this from Brewster's, although ice cream, there's not a lot of waste. But Nathan's hot dogs, there was a lot of waste. The health department says French fries can only sit for so many minutes, and then you have to throw them out. And hot dogs the same way. So, but wax, if you don't use it today, you can use it tomorrow. So it's not easy to control or decrease your cost of goods sold. But from a cash flow perspective, we want to watch when we reorder. So cost of goods sold is we're more focused on cash flow than we are trying to decrease cost of goods sold. But we're always looking for better places to buy vessels and wicks and wax. But they're commodities, so you're not going to move the needle a lot there. But the big place that we differentiate ourselves are payroll. So Kenny and I, we have 3 company-owned stores. We don't work in any of those stores. We're not a Chandler. We're not going in. So the business is not working us. So we've proven out that if someone wants to be an investor in this concept, they want to own multiple locations. And right now we have 2 franchisees that have bought 3-packs. We have a couple that bought a 3-pack in Pittsburgh, and we have a couple in Virginia. They live in Virginia. They're going to open up their first store in Washington, D.C., and then they're going to open up 2 stores in Virginia. So the labor model is a very friendly labor model for someone that wants to be an investor. But the business is also a very fun business. So if someone wants to be an owner-operator, then they would be able to put some additional money in their pocket because they're going to be paying themselves versus paying a manager. Now, in the stores that Kenny and I are not working in, we do have a full-time manager in those stores. We have 1 full-time employee. The rest are part-time employees. The experience is a very typical experience. So the experience costs $62. So if 2 people come in, they're going to, on average, spend $175, and then they're going to tip on top of that. In the state of Pennsylvania, you're allowed to have a tip wage. And so our payroll cost averages somewhere between 10 and 15%. In the restaurant industry, it's probably around 35%. And so when you can drive down your payroll costs and control your cost of goods sold, then all you need then is what we call cheeks and seats. You need more people sitting in your store to increase the top line so that the bottom line looks that much better. Yeah.
I love it. Cheeks and seats. That needs to be on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker or something if you don't already have one. That's a great one. That's a good one. So yeah, you referenced, payroll and COGS being, somewhat variable in terms of being able to drive that margin. And that's fantastic once you're kind of opened and operated, right? If I'm a new investor and I want to invest into the organization, the company, and I open a store, what does that typical build out cost look like? Can you give us some kind of a range?
Yeah. So Joe, coming from the franchise world, I'm allowed to share the numbers that are in the FDD. So if someone got the FDD today, the FDD would say that range is $285,007 to $379,195. those two numbers and any number in between includes the franchise fee. It includes 3 months worth of working capital, which is rent, payroll, and other operating costs. And so in addition to the tables, the wax melter, your starting inventory, it also, that range includes the franchise fee and 3 months worth of working capital.
That's awesome. Considering the margin, the ramp, the scale, that is a very healthy budget for anyone that's looking to invest and get a return on investment very quickly. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with everyone. What percentage, if you can give us a ballpark, of that revenue is coming from those events versus just people walking in and wanting to do the kind of the one-off experience?
Yeah, so the place where we're similar to a restaurant is we take reservations. And so we've used a number of different platforms, including Toast, which is probably the most popular platform for restaurants, to take reservations. And so the vast majority of our revenue is from people that have made reservations. So another differentiator for us is we spend a lot of time on making sure that we're at the top of the Google search. So if someone's searching, I want to do something fun this weekend, one of the reasons we sit at the top is we have thousands of 5-star Google review. And so we have a whole training around how to get those Google reviews while people are in the store. So once somebody leaves the store, any store, it doesn't matter what store it is, it's doubtful that they're going to remember, oh yeah, I just left Home Depot and I was at the checkout and they said, could you leave us a review? Like once I'm out the door, I'm not going to go to my phone and leave a review, but we have a training program for our channelers on how to get the reviews while their guests are in the store. The other thing that helps us quite a bit there is we're a very photogenic and videogenic concept. And so you'll walk into our store and you'll see people with their phones out, and the wife is saying to the husband, or the girls are saying to each other, film me while I'm doing this. And then some of them will post that and they'll tag us. The other thing that we've done to be intentional about marketing is we have built a photo wall. So there's a bench in every store, and behind the bench is a green wall, and in the green wall is a lit sign where friends gather. And part of the experience, our channelers will ask, hey, Joe, can we get you and your group to go up front to our photo wall? And then we take your picture with your group with your phone and give that back to you. And because we're very videogenic, we also hire influencers to come in. Some of those influencers are paid money, and some accept the experience for free, and then they'll create a video. And again, if your listeners go out to Instagram, they'll see curated videos done by influencers. And so we get a lot of social media marketing done for us. And then we also, on our staff, the franchisor staff, we have 2 full-time marketing people. We have a marketing director and a social media coordinator that their job is to make sure that there is content out there helping all stores get the message out that Cork Candles is a place where people can come and do an experience with their friends.
That's amazing. We'll make sure to put the Instagram link in the comments, so definitely go check it out if you haven't already. I've done it, and there's some pretty cool videos on there of what you're able to make a candle visually look like. It's pretty neat. Pivoting slightly, obviously you're a franchisor and you're looking to sell this brand nationwide. What type of franchisees are you looking for that, in your belief system, is one that's going to thrive in your model?
Yeah, so that's I think we've thought a lot about this. And so if there were a consultant out there that's advertising, do you want to own a business, and a call comes in, or if a call came to me, I would ask, are you interested in brick and mortar? Not everybody is interested in brick and mortar. If they say no brick and mortar, well, we're a brick and mortar concept. We're not in a van driving around making candles. I'm not sitting at my home sending you a package in the mail and then you make candles at your home. We're a brick and mortar. We want the candidate to love hospitality. And so again, the most fun I have is I walk into the store and I feel like everybody's my friend. I'm just socializing with everybody, helping them do something that's fun. Last week, I was getting ready to make some videos for content, and my manager comes back and says, "Dave, we just had a walk-in. There's a 12-year-old boy that wants to make one of our Thanksgiving pies. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and he wanted it to be the centerpiece. And could you help him?" And so his grandparents brought him in, and so I spent probably close to 90 minutes with this 12-year-old boy who, surprisingly, so we actually use a piping bag. So just like with icing, so when you whip wax and it's soft, it pipes just like icing. It's really cool. And so I asked this 12-year-old, I said, "Have you ever used a piping bag?" And he said, "Yes, this little boy was a baker." And so he made the most amazing pie. And then there are these three women sitting next to him. There was a mother and two daughters. One of the daughters came home from Syracuse to the Philadelphia area to be home for Thanksgiving. And I just went over to the table. I spent 15 minutes talking to these three women. And one of the daughters had been with us to our store 2 years ago, and she wanted to come back with her mom and her sister. And if you love people, then it's going to be a fun business for someone to own and work in. And then that element that I've already talked about, grit, because every business owner, there's going to be an employee that calls out when you needed them to call in for any reason. They could be sick, or it could be they had a date that night, or any number of issues. And so you're a business owner. You're not the person that gets to turn the light off and go home and your paycheck still shows up every 2 weeks. You're the guy that has to solve the problems. And so you have to want brick and mortar. Hospitality has to be at your core, and you have to have grit. You don't need any candle making experience. All of that we teach everybody. Maybe if someone has an artistic background or is interested in that, but it's not required. I can train anybody to make all of the candles that we made. So if a 12-year-old can make a great looking pie, I can teach an adult how to do it. In fact, our youngest customer was a 6-year-old. His parents came in and he made the candle. So, yeah.
Well, I know some 6 and some 12-year-olds, they artistically can potentially do better than I can, but I'm sure your training will close that gap. So speaking of training, like, what does that initial training and support look like if someone was to buy into the brand and officially open their store? How do you help get them to that place and then successful post-open?
Yeah, so the training is multifaceted. We've invested a lot of time in creating playbooks. So we look at every link in the chain, and we've created a video playbook for that link, going all the way down to we've created our chart of accounts. So if I've never done an accounting, I'm a CPA, so I'm very comfortable with accounting and numbers, but lots of people, I don't know what a debit is, right? So we've created a chart of accounts. We've created videos on if someone wanted to learn how to do the accounting, they could do it, or they can outsource that to an accountant. To every candle that we make in the store, there's a video on how to make that candle. Now, before you open, you'll come into our store and you'll make every candle. So when I started at Brewster's, I went away for 11 days. Half those days I was in a store and I was running the ice cream machine, serving customers. Kind of the same training will happen in our store. So someone, when they leave after 3 or 4 days, they will feel really comfortable in how to make candles, as well as how to greet and service tables, how to greet the guests, and how to handle the candle making from start to finish. And then I'll travel out to the stores and be with them, or we'll handle phone calls. The other thing that we've done intentionally is we've linked all of our franchisees together. And so some franchisees have already created friendships I always thought one of the best parts of being a franchisee, there are two things I thought, is I now know how I'm doing. If it was Dave Straub's candle making business and I didn't know what my labor cost should be or my cost of goods sold should be, I might say I'm doing great and I'm doing lousy. So you can benchmark against other stores if you're in a franchise. But the other thing is you're not in it alone. If someone's running an ad in another state and they're killing it, you can pick up the phone and you can call that other franchisee and say, what are you doing? So it's not just the franchisor that's available to assist you, but really most of the value is going to come from your friends that you make that are also owner operators, because they're the ones that are solving the same problems that you're solving.
Yeah, I love it. It's becoming a where friends gather holistically, not just inside of the four walls of the business, right? That's amazing. What's next on the horizon for Cork Candles as we project into next year, 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, so the goal is we want to grow at a controlled pace. So there's some franchisors that, they might sign up 30, 50 or more franchisees, and only a portion of them get open. So right now we have 9 territories awarded. Our mission between now and June is to get 4 of those open and to sign another 6. And so this goal was set on July 1 of this year. We have a fiscal year, July 1 to June 30th. And so by June 30th of 2026, we want to have 15 licenses awarded and about half of those open. And our mission is to demonstrate not only that I can do it, but our franchisees are thriving as well. And so our real focus today is getting stores open and adding others at a controlled pace so that we know that our playbooks that we've created, they're the right playbooks. But we'll adjust, we won't get it right perfectly, but we'll adjust as needed. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a learning experience, right? At a bare minimum, it'll be a learning experience, but most likely it's going to be a success knowing you and the team that's supporting you to achieve those goals. I have no doubt you're going to be able to do it. Pivoting slightly outside of Cork and Candles, if that's possible for a moment, just more of an open-ended question to a founder out there, because you've done this a couple of times now, who is trying to scale like an in-person experience type of job into something that's repeatable. What kind of advice would you give to that person who's in that spot?
So I love this saying. I'm not sure it's a perfect fit to your question. It's better to start imperfectly than wait to be perfect to start. And so if someone has an idea to scale, if somebody has an idea to start something, it's better to start and get it wrong and adjust along the way. I heard this story a number of years, probably decades ago. It sounds like it could be true, but it could be a story that when NASA first sent their first lunar module to the moon, and then the engineers met with the media asked the engineers, how was it possible to hit an object that's moving and is so far away? And the engineer said, well, we actually knew we would miss the target. That wasn't the hardest thing. And the media said, well, what's the hardest thing? The hardest thing is getting out of the atmosphere. And then once you're out of the atmosphere, you make on-course corrections till you hit your target. And so it's more important to get out of the atmosphere. It's more important to start whatever you feel you need to do to scale and then make on-course corrections. But if you're waiting to get it perfect before you start, you'll never get the first base. And so for us, because of our business is very videogenic, so now I'm going from global down to more of the weeds for your listeners, Joe, is we know that social media is where most people get their content today. So when I was a little boy, in addition to candle making, I delivered newspapers. Nobody delivers newspapers in my neighborhood today. Like I cut grass, I rake leaves. Things are very different today, and where people get their news. my first TV that I can remember, my house was black and white, and I got 3, 6, 10, 17, 29. I got 5 channels. Now we get hundreds of channels. And so for our business and a lot of businesses, in fact, what you're doing right now is social media learning. We spend a lot of effort on LinkedIn, YouTube, Meta, and TikTok and Instagram. They're the 5 platforms that we have a lot of focus on, and that's why we've hired a full-time social media director. And we also are educating ourselves to get better at the 2 things that will drive cheeks and seats or drive visitors to a website. And that is, if you don't have enough revenue, it's because of 2 things. You haven't notified enough people. So you haven't broadcast enough. You haven't advertised on enough billboards. You just haven't done enough. So people don't know that you're there. And so you have to do more, but you have to do more to the audiences that want to buy your product. So we have data about who comes into Cork and Candles. And the second thing is, whatever you're doing with your notification, there has to be a hook that is of value enough that someone would want to come into your store or go to your website and buy, whether that's a free offer or that is something unique that someone say, wow, I want to go to Cork and Candles. We're spending a lot of time on getting better at doing more, but also doing more better. Yeah. And I would say that that's true. And anybody that wants to scale, do more and do it better.
Do more better. Yeah, that was a masterclass, by the way, on like social media marketing. There's a ton of people out there that do one or the other very, very well, not always do both. So that was an amazing testimony right there. Dave, this has been fire, dude, to use something that comes from a candle, fire, lit flames, right? This has been fire. This has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your story with our audience, the legacy that you and your family have created now into the 3rd generation, really, of this entire footprint. And I'm sure it's going to continue well beyond that. To our listeners out there, check the comments. We're going to have all the social platform links to Cork and Candles, so you can go see the Instagram posts and really see what differentiates Cork and Candles from some other candle making scent bar that might be out there, and really why they're driving home their tagline of where friends come together. Did I say that right, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone to listening. Please reach out to myself and or Dave and his team if you have any questions around Cork and Candles, and let's make this not only their legacy, but your legacy that lasts. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Joe.